What am I saying again?
This is MPW.
MPW.
The podcast.
With your host,
Xylo Aria. Cool.
A podcast about music production
for the everyday musician,
where we learn from experienced studio engineers and each other.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the MPW Podcast. I'm your host, Xylo Aria, and today we are talking to Benn Jordan. So Benn is a modern jazz and electronic musician, and he also runs an incredible YouTube channel, which is very informative, and you should check it out under Benn Jordan. So really great to have you today, Ben. How's your day been so far?
I'm actually getting ready for a trip to go record nature sounds far away from civilization. So I'm like very tired because I'm like testing out this electronic bike to make sure that I could, safely go off trail and all these things. And so that's what I've been like panicking with for the last day or two, and tomorrow, and then I leave on Sunday. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, that sounds fun, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Be cool.
Yeah.
So, how you came across my radar was from the YouTube video that you made not too long ago about why there are so few female producers.
Mm-hmm.
And, really honest thing of when it first came across to me. I think it was on one of the music blogs that I saw it. And I was like, oh, God, here we go. White male telling us about our problems.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, God, okay, I'm going to check this out. And I was very quickly and pleasantly surprised at how great it was. Like, it just, the way you explored the topic, because, I think as a female, what talking about this stuff is going to be like, and that there's always going to be those people that you just have to prepare yourself that you're going to have to deal with these people as soon as you put out anything like this. So I was like, why are you doing this? You don't have to do that. So that was one. And also the fact that it could have gone a few different ways, but I felt like the way you explored everything was pretty thorough in the fact that you spoke to quite a few different people, and I could relate to everything that they were saying. And also the facts were quite jarring, but also it was put in a way that was, I think, just nice. So I'm we'll get into that a bit more about why you created that, and also looking at a few more things in detail that you spoke about. But I'd love to hear a bit more about you, Ben, and to introduce you to our audience on how you got started in music and how you got to where you are today.
So let's see. I grew up in South Chicago, and which is like, kind of notoriously, not the nicest place to grow up in, but, it has its ups and downs. I was into jazz at a young age. I played guitar, played jazz guitar as a kid. When I was a teenager, I, was in a couple bands, and then I just decided to buy a drum machine and some other things, and I learned how to play drums. And I've always been very DIY about everything. Early on, I had to be on record labels and stuff like that in order to have anything out, because that was just the way it worked. But as things, as the internet and technology and Napster and everything else, I was able to actually make a living without record labels and without stuff like that. And so, that ended up with touring and a lot of albums and a lot of different creative work in many different areas of the music industry. And then the YouTube channel kind of came from, I worked for about 3 years on an album right when I first moved down here in Georgia. And I didn't talk to that many people, and I didn't really socialize all that much. And I realized that I was, like, I would go get my hair cut or something, and it was difficult for me to have a conversation. Like, I realized that I'd isolated myself enough to where I was actually, losing social skills. And I was like, well, I kind of thought about having a YouTube channel and just for a fun thing, and maybe I'll get some free gear or something. And so I just started reviewing synths and stuff like that. And sure enough, after a while, I think I started getting better at it. If I look at my older videos and look at my newer ones, I'm like, oh, wow, I can string a lot more words together without saying or swearing or, something like that. Yeah. And I've always been pretty passionate about whatever it is that I'm working on. And so I think that videos like the one that you were referencing was just like a matter of time before. But that one I did put a lot of time into. Yeah, just naturally because I wanted to get it right. I wanted basically whenever I make a video like that, I want if somebody wants to argue about it in the comments, like I want them to, the biggest defense to their argument to be like, well, you didn't watch the video. Like, because I already covered all the devil's advocates and I've already, and so.
Yeah, definitely. Like I found that as well because I was kind of scrolling through the comments because I was interested to see what people are saying. And you're very right in the sense that most of the people that, had negative things to say, you had already addressed them. So that's a really, big thing to be able to do because I think often it's hard to cover everything, every part of a topic, but you seem to cover a vast majority of it. So,
it was so difficult to get that video under an hour, to get it down to like 44 minutes or whatever it ended up being. Because in the beginning I was like, I really just want it to be like 15 minutes, 20 minutes to be easily digestible because when things are that short, it gets picked up in the algorithm a lot easier. And this one did not get picked up in the algorithm, performs less than, videos where I just talk about a synthesizer to where I just, list off something. But that's because, the engagements, it's difficult to keep somebody in front of a YouTube video for 44 minutes. Naturally, I don't take it as an insult. It's
no.
So.
No, definitely. I didn't think it was performing poorly. I mean, obviously, I don't know your stats, but it seemed to a bit of engagement, especially with the comments back and forth and that kind of thing. But yeah, interesting. And also, cool to hear that you started the YouTube channel to get over your kind of social awkwardness because that really doesn't come across now. You seem quite articulate and that kind of thing. And sometimes to get over our fears, if you want to call it that, you do kind of need to just jump into the deep end and do the thing that's maybe more scary. Yeah.
I think which is kind of funny because especially when you talk about a video like this, one of my biggest fears was just saying something that would destroy my career. Because I don't feel like I'm above that. I feel like I can say something stupid. I can have a really bad gaffe at, and so I think like I was worried about that happening, but now that I'm years into it, it's like, that's kind of a dumb thing to worry about. Like, I don't think that's actually, I think it's possible for me to say something stupid, but, I think that I've learned my audience or, I know my audience well enough to sort of gauge what is expected.
Yeah, it is a tough thing to deal with though. I mean, like I like to be a bit political and stuff in a few things that I say as well. And a couple of them have backfired a little bit in the way that I think I just haven't phrased it the way I kind of wanted it to, which is really easy to do and things can be totally taken out of context. And then I've just thought, that's it. I've lost, a certain amount of my engagement from a certain number of people in the audience or whatever. But then obviously we make it a bigger thing in our head than sometimes it is. There's a million other things going on and people just kind of move on.
No, it's important also to know, a friend of mine, when I was making this video and other videos, a friend of mine was like, Ben, a lot of people on the internet are hurt. They're just hurting. They're just not happy for whatever reason, whether it be, some like contemporary thing that's going on or whether they're, a marginalized person or a confused person, whatever it is that they are. A lot of times the face on the YouTube channel or the face on the podcast is the punching bag for them. And then there's a lot of people who are just very insecure and they have not achieved as much as some of their peers. And so therefore, they tear others down to feel better about themselves. But that, keeps them in this miserable cycle. I feel bad. I don't really hate people who are mean to me in my comments. I feel bad for them because I just imagine like, where would I be in my life if I were typing that, like what kind of basement would I be living in where I'd be like so upset at women that I would say these horrible things or I was so upset at, an artist or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're totally right. I was talking about this to a friend the other day actually, and he was saying the same thing. He's like, just imagine being in that person's headspace. You just be like, you just have so much anger in your life all the time, which is it's a sad thing. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So so this episode, I was going to talk to you about, just kind of women in music, but getting a male perspective, because I think it's not something that you can do very often. So I thought I should make the most of this opportunity. But like you were saying, you know, when you talk about something like this, there is maybe this fear, whether it's rational or not, of you know, having a negative impact or it having a negative impact on your career. So why did you talk about this? Or what made you create the video?
I think kind of what you're talking about right now, like, so there's two different ends of this, like you wanting to hear a man's perspective or a man's perspective on this issue. I think that you may have the opposite problem where like you only hear a man's perspective on this issue, but it's just in a very bad platform. It's just in a platform that is one that's out of anger, or a platform that, you know, might be not actually checking up on facts. A lot of that comes from, you know, I think I just got really frustrated because I knew that these problems existed, maybe not to the extent to where I had the statistics for it, but I knew that these problems existed.
Yeah.
And it's been half a decade of just hearing men repeating Jordan Petersonisms over and over again about, you know, how men and women are different and why women tend to be marginalized in certain industries and things like that. And, you know, Jordan Peterson is not an evolutionary biologist. He's a psychologist who many would argue is suffering from mental illness. I'm not even making fun of him when I say that. Like, if you read a recent interview of his, he's arguably suffering from mental illness very badly himself. And so, like, but him being some sort of authority on this is totally false, and people just sort of pick up on it on something he said in a podcast or some sort of debate that, you know, made him a lot of money. I wanted devil's advocates for this video. I begged for them. I begged to have people like him on it. He wanted $50,000 in editing rights to comment on his own previous statements, you know? And it's like, Cordelia Fine didn't want any money. She was more than happy to help me, you know? And so it was kind of interesting to like see who's making money off of this controversy and who's actually contributing to science or philosophy or, you know, things like that.
Wow.
And so I guess to answer your question, I feel like I kind of in my head, and I didn't make this and I didn't think that, you know, it would actually be possible, but I wanted to get as close as I could to just making a definitive argument for other men to see and it kind of worked to some degree, you know, like there's some comments that you could read where people are like, I've totally done this. I've behaved this way and I didn't realize it. And that's like, that makes me tear up. Like, you know, hearing somebody say that on the internet in 2021 is just crazy. And so, that's basically the gist of it is it was just, I feel like there was no like voice of reason in the center, I guess, or there was nobody actually like, you know, checking all the boxes and weirdly related to this is like, and sort of talking about what I was talking about earlier, where I like learned to speak better and stuff. A lot of things, like I didn't know what I was talking about when I started this project. I don't have a degree in gender studies or anything like that. And I'm not a woman, so I've not experienced any of these things. And so, you know, I only had my own anecdotal experiences, and then I just sort of like followed a path from there. But from being on YouTube and from doing these things, I've kind of gained this skill to speak like I'm a 10 when I'm only a 6 or a 7. And that's a predominantly male thing. That's mansplaining. It really is. And I try as much as I can to not do it when talking to people in real life, and as much as I can to do it when talking on YouTube, to like, you know, just simply because you could hold somebody's attention more if you're speaking with authority and if you're speaking with confidence. However, this is something that men have the privilege of having a step up in, just simply because we're treated differently, right? So yeah. Well, a few interesting things you mentioned there. I mean, one was that you said that, you know, in a way you only hear the male perspective, but
I don't personally, like me also running a platform like music production for women and just being surrounded by other kind of female advocating organizations. Sometimes, and this is where I fear that I don't really know if we're going about this the right way, is that like there's a lot of conversation happening about this topic to people that are already aware of this topic. So it's kind of like women talking to women about this stuff. So I hear, for me, it seems like there's a lot of support for women, obviously, because I'm talking to a lot of women. So, but kind of, and then the other side of it is where there are men who are maybe opposed to these views that are hearing some of it, and you hear the sort of backlash from them. But where, like this conversation doesn't happen often is we just kind of on a level playing field. You're not kind of trying to fight someone to convince them of something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I thought it would be really an interesting conversation to have, because I feel like this sort of conversation doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So that's one point. And also another point that you mentioned, that you probably have a way of speaking to your audience that that they will relate to on some level, which is a really, it's a great thing to be able to do. And also, I didn't realize how necessary it is for things like this as well, because one thing, at the end of your video that it made me a little bit sad is that if a woman made this video, it would have got a totally different reaction. Like people just wouldn't have taken it as seriously. And those comments of, men saying, oh, I've totally done this and now I feel bad. I don't think you would have seen that if it was created by a woman. And initially I was a bit sad about that. But then I thought, actually, it's really important that a man made this, because they can relate to you and they can maybe see themselves in you in a way which we need, or we definitely need to get these people on board to be able to make a change. So I think it is really important that a man made this in a way. So yeah, that was...
Well, I think there is something to be said too for fighting for your own interests or fighting for a general interest. Like, a good example would be like I made a video about the environmental impact of vinyl. And I've released and sold thousands of vinyls in my life. And, I'm an electronic musician, which is, synonymous with vinyl. But so I took a crap on vinyl for 25 minutes on YouTube and the environmental impact of it and how it's a bad novelty to have in this day and age. And I feel like that argument, just got through to so many more people just because it's like, well, he's losing money by not making vinyl anymore. So clearly... there must be an actual point here. He's not just saying that, because he's selling some sort of new, music thing or, some sort of alternative to vinyl. And so maybe it's not as clearly related in this video, but, I'm not a woman that's trying to make, a living in electronic music. And I'm not trying to garner more attention for myself or any of the things that men might accuse somebody of doing. Or, what I talked about with homophily in the video, that's a big issue too. And I feel like when people see somebody different talk about something, they look for something wrong, and that might be the thing that they look for that's wrong. It's like, how is this person being an opportunist by saying this, So
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, for sure.
This episode is brought to you by MPW Membership. Did you know that all MPW members get access to monthly group catch-up calls with the rest of the MPW community? This is the perfect resource to help keep you focused on your goals and to give you support through your music production journey. This is a free feature for all MPW members. Take advantage of this awesome feature and so many more using the link musicproductionforwomen.com/membership.
So I'm keen to hear, you did mention a little bit about the response that it's had among some people, that hopefully some people that have been doing a few things that you mentioned might be making the environment not so nice for women to change their behaviour. But are there any other sort of general responses that you found among your audience, like good, bad? Was it from men or women, or just in general?
What was really funny is the video I sort of gave a couple hours advance on Twitter and told people that this video is coming out and made it a YouTube premiere. And the reason I did that was because I knew that people would be arguing with it in the comments before the video actually aired. And so, and I wanted to just see that. Like I think I even said that on Twitter. I was like, let's see how many arguments we get of people who are arguing with the video that they haven't watched yet. Because the comment section is like, the best way that I could put it is, if you go to a museum and you, I don't know, or you go to a zoo and you have like a little ant exhibit and you read about the ants and maybe you could watch a little video about the ants, and then below it, you have a little ant colony that you could see them live. And that's what the comment section is like in that video, where you actually can see this toxic sexism happening before your eyes in real time, and you could interact with it. And, one of the biggest comments was like, or I think one of the top comments was a woman who had some similar experiences on her channel, and she was talking about her own comments on her own channel. Yeah. And of course, some guy just relentlessly was like, no way, I did the math. Not this many comments are negative, and it's just and he just berated her for days, and like it was his full-time job. He just and it's like, okay, there you go. This is exactly what we're talking about. Thank you so much for that example. I'm sorry it had to be at someone's like frustration or someone's expense, but generally, I think it was like 95% positive. Like I think that my main audience is open-minded and. Again, they've like listened to me deliver other pills that were not easy to swallow, like, addressing the toxicity of vinyl or, Spotify or whatever it is. And so I think that the ridiculous comments that you see on the video aren't for my subscribers. I think that they're from people who kind of look for and spend their time in a culture war. And so, they're looking for that in general. And, they found it. And so they have something to say, and they've probably said it in 500 different videos. But
Yeah.
But and then circling back to the people that I mentioned where they, said that, oh my God, I totally do this. Yeah, that's such a good sign, not only because it made me feel like my video actually had some positive impact, but just I think it kind of shows that a lot of men are not, a lot of men are realizing that they're inadvertently causing this harm. And I think that means that it is an easier fix for a lot of people because, they probably are good-natured and they probably just didn't realize that they're doing this, which is so much better than somebody who's digging their heels in, especially in, today's political climate and stuff. So
yeah, you're right. Totally. And yeah, it is true that I think I've realized as well, and a few conversations that I've had with really experienced female producers about their, I've spoken to them about what's been really tough for them in their career. And a few of them have just mentioned that when they've come up with a situation where they've been, maybe some like sexual connotations in a particular situation, when they've called that out to the person, they have, the person has sort of realized that, oh yeah, maybe this could make someone feel really uncomfortable, which isn't really what I intended them to feel, even though, sometimes you're like, as if you didn't see that as a woman, it's so obvious. But yeah, I guess if you've never been in that situation before, it's not so obvious. So maybe pointing it out will be, a fix for a certain percentage of people.
Men have their own little, environment with that, I think, because you have the whole white knight thing. And you have the simp thing. Like they've even made up words for guys who defend women's rights, who defend women, because their brain can't go beyond. And this is something that I've heard from a lot in my video and in the past, where their brains can't go beyond. Well, he's doing this just because he wants to get laid. It's like, I don't, if that's the only way you could translate this video is like somehow I'm going to make this video and then, go to the gas station and women are just going to be, it doesn't really work that way. And these are the same people that, for example, for a really long time, I've tried to hire, when I go on tour, I've tried to hire women as, whether it be like a tour manager or an audio engineer or something like that, just because it's not even me being woke by doing it. It's just that women tend to be amazingly more efficient at those jobs. And I don't know if it's because they want to prove that they can be amazingly efficient at those jobs, but I do know that they don't, get drunk every single night and try and meet women and get laid. Like they actually, which is what a lot of guys do when you hire them. So for years, I've hired women on tour, again, not even as a political statement. And of course, a lot of people are just like, well, yeah, of course you did. You're bringing chicks with you on tour. And it's like, that's as far as your brain can go. When you think of a female, then I'm not even sure what I could possibly say to make you think differently. Like that's what's concerning is however you got to your identity on this topic was not a route of logic or, reasonable thinking. And so I have no idea how to get you out of it. And so, stay on that side of the internet for now, I guess.
Exactly. Can only do what we can.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And just your video introduced a few interesting concepts or terms that I'd never heard of before. And as a woman, it was just really sad, but also weirdly comforting that the fact that there were these terms for these certain behaviors that meant that, it is something that's experienced by, more than one person. Because I think one thing that I've heard just so often talking to women about production and being in a studio space or whatever is that when they feel that someone's doing a certain thing that's making them feel uncomfortable, the first response for a lot of women seems to be, oh, is it me? Like, is it just me? Have I done something wrong? Like, have I put across an incorrect message or something like that? And it took me a long, long time to be like, actually, no, it's not. Like, someone actually meant this in a way that made me feel uncomfortable and it's not my fault. And negging was one of those terms that came across in your video.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's really important for other women to hear.
Yeah. So I think that the first time that I heard the term negging was there's a book called The Game, which I cannot remember the author's name.
I've heard of it.
I think he was a Rolling Stone writer who ended up, it weirdly enough, it became popular as a sort of like how to pick up women guide when it's actually more of it's more of a book that is like a look inside the pickup artist industry. And it is actually really fascinating and tragic in parts. And I don't know, I'm not going to say it's the best book in the world, but it's worth a read if anybody's interested in that. And you realize that in these pickup artist they were cults. Like they would honestly, basically drain people of their money to teach them how to pick up women and then have them like move into a house. And, it's a pretty crazy thing. But anyway, negging was a big tactic to, go to a nightclub and say something like, oh my God, your dress is so lovely. It reminds me of this awesome one my mother has, and the idea is to look like a nice person while making a person value themselves less, which is truly horrible, borderline sociopathic behavior. But I want to be clear that I don't believe that this is what's happening in my examples, though. I don't think that the majority is consciously using manipulation tactics in a YouTube comment or something like that. I think that it's much more akin to being impressed by someone or attracted to them and then looking for something that needs improvement and watching the video or listening to the song in that regard. And then that way you give yourself an opening so you can introduce yourself as a valuable asset. And so it's like, it's not as evil as consciously negging, but it's opportunistic and it tends to lead to the same result. So it's still just as bad. And it's really, and this is something that I've caught myself doing. This is something that I have caught my friends doing. This is rampant. And men just love doing it all the time. It's just a very common thing. But it was interesting because I feel like when it came to like Sarah Longfield's videos, my brain immediately went to that book, The Game. And I was like, they're really doing what was taught to be these really, deceitful manipulation tactics to get women to sleep with men in a nightclub or something like that. But, they're doing it on YouTube to 15-year-old playing the guitar, And so it's like this and Maddie J, she was in my video as well. She shared one of her older videos with me, one of the ones she had taken down, and it was that same thing. It was very, very disturbing to see a bunch of men just telling a child, a young girl that she's not good enough at an instrument that she's killing it on. It's just very, very strange. But yeah, very disturbing.
Yeah, interesting. And another term that you introduced was homophily, and you did mention that just at the start. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'll do my best. I'm not a evolutionary biologist or anything, but I did learn a lot about it in this just because I kind of got caught on that term because I was like, oh man, this explains way more than I ever imagined it would. And so I guess like rolling back to pre-civilization, this is stuff that like I could have said in my video if I wanted it to be 90 minutes, but I was like, I got to cut this out. So if we go back to like pre-civilization and we're hunters and gatherers, and so that's like, 3 million years ago until about 10,000 BC. So 2.99 million years of evolution where we're surviving as nomadic tribes. And let's say that you're a tall family that wears, I don't know, jacaranda leaves around your neck. And you take care of your children. Some people hunt, some people gather, some teach, some entertain. And you notice a stranger in your camp one night who's short, maybe has a different color skin tone, maybe he's carrying a different weapon or a different tool, he's wearing some other plant. And this is bad news in an environment where humans and nature are still competing for resources. And so this different person directly gains from your demise. So we developed or evolved homophily. And those who chase the strange-looking people away survive longer and have more children. And that times 600,000 or so generations. Yeah, and so I guess this is before the Neolithic Revolution, and so change for any animal other than a modern human is legitimately dangerous, and most of our time here we didn't have the technology to change our surroundings to suit us, so xenophobia was actually beneficial. And now that's just inhuman behavior, but it doesn't really make sense anymore because now, we're in a completely different environment in every single way. And so I think that it probably can be the explanation for a lot of different things that are bad. A really good example that is just funny to me, and I laugh about it all the time. I bring my dog to a dog park that has a dog under 30 pounds side, a small dog side, and a big dog side where dogs can be over 30 pounds. These two sides hate each other. Like, they just talk crap about each other constantly. And I'm on the small dog side. And the big dog side people, they don't take care of the grass over there. They don't pick up the poo. They don't care about the dogs fighting. And then the small dog people, like, they're just, they're really rude. And they, and I hear both sides of this sometimes. And it's just so funny because these are people who have so much in common. These are people who live in the same neighborhood, who go to the same dog park for the same type of animal. Like, everything they have is in common except for how much their dog weighs. Yet we've created these two groups that hate each other and nobody can be friends between them. And it's so ridiculous. It just makes you realize that our brains are like still stuck in this, in this old hunter-gatherer mindset in so many ways. And we just have to try and get past that as much as we can. And I don't think it's hard to do, but I think you just have to recognize it. You have to just be like, why am I less comfortable around people that aren't like me? Or why am I less likely to watch a woman's, YouTube audio page or listen to a woman's music with the same regard that I would a man's. As a man, I say this, And I think once you sort of realize, like, homophily, that's why I'm doing this, then it's a lot easier to actually associate both sexes or genders with whatever it is that you're, looking for. And so, I don't know. I hope that's probably as good of an explanation I could give without feeling like I need to call in an expert. But, yeah.
No, I think that was really good. Kind of putting it back to the hunter-gatherer times, I think really helped to make it a bit more clear why is it that we feel threatened by anything that's different to us or different to what we know.
Yeah, it's just so crazy because once you actually think about that and just look at pretty much everything, you see that almost all human beings, including ourselves, that we just have so many like Mesolithic traits from that era which totally makes sense because again, this is millions of years. And, I forgot what the actual stat is, but if you look at, the times, if we were to take the time that humans have been on the planet and put it into one calendar year, we're on New Year's Eve. Like that's where we are currently, and so that's how much old evolution we have and, how little new evolution we have. So a couple million years, we'll probably have this problem sorted out, maybe.
Maybe. Oh, God. So maybe we're not as close as we think.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. No, that's all good. So we've spoken about a few things that that you mentioned that, because I think, a few things in the video came up that men didn't realize was something that women go through. And especially I saw a few of the comments, like people were saying, oh, as someone with a lot of female friends in the industry and stuff, this was really kind of sad for me to hear. Were there any other challenges that we kind of haven't spoken about that you found in your study that women experience consistently that men don't realize are hurdles for them in the industry?
That's a good question. And I think that I really tried to avoid things that could potentially be abstract, because it's just harder to make a video that changes anybody's view if you're speaking in abstracts. So there are things, and one thing that I thought of a lot, and honestly, one of the people, I don't know if you're familiar with Ella, she's kind of a famous cam girl or sex worker. And she's also involved in, she's invented her own blockchain-based dating app, and she's a researcher. But she still, makes most of her money from OnlyFans and things like this. And I interviewed her for the video, and it just ended up not being totally relevant. But, I felt that if women are being treated like sex workers when they upload a YouTube video or a song somewhere, then I might as well just interview, one of the most popular sex workers in the world and see what she has to say. And again, she is a brilliant person. And so it sucked because I couldn't really take anything out of my interview with her and put it in the context of the video in a way that made sense, because without making the video much longer and going into a lot more abstract things. One of the things that she pointed to a lot was just general social value. And I thought a lot about that. And musicians, we have a very weighted amount of social power. And most people have a favorite pair of shoes, but they don't know the name of the designer, much less the person who sewed the shoes. And social power is really, really contagious. And so when you think about something like groupies, your standard definition of hordes of women trying to sleep with rock stars. And this is something I've witnessed myself, not as a rock star, but as somebody who existed on tour buses for months and opening for musicians much more popular than myself. But I think about this a lot. And the number one place where I've been approached by women has been at my own live performances. And then I'd say occasionally online or something like that. And this decreased a bit as I've gotten older, naturally. But I'm never approached by women at a grocery store. I have very little social value there. Other people make you appear more valuable when they're paying attention to you. And so when you break this down, when I play a show, every single person in that room has paid money just to stare at me. And so hanging out with me seems way more valuable than it actually is. I can assure you it's pretty lame. But I think this becomes a bit more concerning when, for example, my friends and family back home think that me going on tour is a girls gone wild extravaganza. It's not, but the fact that women play this particular role in so many people's heads, including women, that's what's really jarring to me. And so it's a bit more of an abstract concept, but it's almost like explaining, if I were, in relationships I've been in where I've had girlfriends, explaining to them that my tour is not filled with women that are just throwing themselves at me to sleep with me. That girlfriend or relationship or partner is still thinking of women in that regard, where you're like, no, women open for me or I open for them. They're also musicians, believe it or not. An odd but really good example of this. I'm a big fan of MMA and boxing, and I absolutely despise ring girls. Even outside of any sort of social justice aspect, it's just gaudy and stupid, and it makes me feel dumb for watching the sport. So when Ronda Rousey was the most popular fighter in the world, there were a lot of women fighting in the UFC who were making less than the ring girls were making. And so they're risking everything, stacking up brain injury, getting beat up for the entire world to see. And the girl in the bikini who held a paper sign for 10 seconds got paid more. And if that's not a middle finger, I don't know what is. And so I guess circling back a bit, if this social value is contagious and exponential, which it seems to be, if you add homophily to it and consider the wide disparity, you can see how steep the mountain is. And it's not the most, it's not the most positive thing to end a video on or anything like that. But that was sort of one of the bigger challenges, is thinking about how we just see women in music and how we see men in music, even outside of the online world. When we think of the the Guns N' Roses groupies and all of the stereotypes. Like we really have to work hard to get rid of that. Like really, really hard, and I thought that I was doing my part in the past, hiring women on tour, but then people would just say, look at all the groupies with him, when they were like the people doing the audio engineering and the accounting, and people would be like, wow, look at all those chicks he's with. And it's like, no, they're like working. They have brains, believe it.
Wow. Yeah, fascinating. Actually, that is a bit depressing. It just feels like we're so far. But yeah, no, fascinating concept. And yeah, I think you're right. Like sometimes you can't see how these things impact directly what's happening with, women in production or whatever. But each of these is inherently such a big part of the issue. So yeah, something to kind of think about.
It just that like social value and that contagiousness of it. That's what really, and again, that's such an abstract thing that I couldn't really put it in the video because, and I also don't know what I'm talking about, right? Again, this isn't like my career, but just noticing that and then being like, I guess it's like, how does that end up? It makes it just a lot more complicated, and there's just a lot more variables. But yeah.
And one thing that I've been thinking about, like as a feminist and as someone, trying to do something to improve this situation. And I'm always trying to think, how can we make the biggest kind of impact with the content that we put out? And even as a feminist, sometimes I find feminist content quite jarring and quite negative. And I see it in a lot of platforms that I really respect what they do, but it's always kind of talking about the negative side of things. And I know, as maybe an older white male who doesn't agree with what I'm saying, they probably see that as way, way more jarring than I do.
Yeah.
So is there a way that we can sort of create content that you think might resonate better with the male audience? Because I think it's really important to get them on board.
Yeah. No, it's refreshing. It's always refreshing to hear that as a concern, to be like, understanding that like the power, that males hold the power that should be spread out more evenly, and that you're going to have to appeal to everybody for that power to be spread out more evenly. And this has a little bit to do with I initially heard about this. God, I'm trying to remember. I went to a seminar years back, and it was about racism. It was here in Atlanta, where like Atlanta is just a very progressive place in terms of dealing with. I mean, it sounds like a lot of people in America would be like, Georgia's not a progressive place with civil rights, but it really is. Like Atlanta is a very is a pretty progressive city when it comes to race relations and stuff like that. And one thing that I've heard a couple times is an analogy for these types of arguments called racing to the bottom. And I feel like that's kind of rampant in any social justice issue. And try and think of like a metaphor is like if we went to a cafeteria and both ordered, I don't know, falafel and rice, and maybe the person working there would say, well, that guy looks big and tall. I bet he's a labor worker, so I'll give him a few extra falafels because he needs some more protein. And then that same guy says, this lady, speaking to you, this lady looks like she's had a long day. Perhaps she's a mom and her kids have, been hard work all day, so I'll give her a piece of cake. And so we sit down and I'm like, hey, I didn't get cake. This is unfair. And so we agree that you'll throw the cake in the garbage so we can make things more fair. But you're like, hey, I didn't get extra falafels. That's unfair. So we chuck them in the trash. But wait a minute, you took the train to the cafe and I had to walk. So I actually needed that protein from those extra falafels. So now you have to walk home now. But you actually have to walk a little bit further home. So I'll walk around the block 6 or 7 times and so on. And so like the better approach would just be marching up to the cafeteria worker and me saying, hey, I've had a long day. I need the cake too. And, trying to get that out of that. Maybe I'll go back to the cafeteria again if we both get a piece of cake rather than us constantly racing to the bottom and taking away the things that we already have. And I think that this type of thinking exists in a vacuum with only like one man and one woman and every other variable removed. Yet we sort of treat things like that when we talk about a lot of sensitive issues. It's just too abstract for subtractive equality. like, I'm totally okay with asking a CEO to pay women as much as men. The goal is to empower the marginalized so they become privileged, not punish the privileged so there are more marginalized people, right? I think that's the best way that I could look at it. And I think that's probably, I mean, if I were to like give advice, which I'm in no way in a position to do, I would probably say to always remember that you want people to have more rights and more wealth. Everybody across the board. And if there is an equality problem, you want to bring the marginalized up rather than pushing, because you're just going to have, even if it is the right thing to do for somebody to have less to meet another person and be equal, you're just going to have a really hard time getting that person to give up something just for that precedent. Like, who wants to do that in reality? That's, we're all still greedy, selfish human beings. And so, I think that's the best way I could look at it. I think it's also, like, oddly enough, it's funny for me to like come on this podcast and complain about a feminist initiative. But years back, I remember there was an initiative about, I believe you call it wolf whistling in the UK and Australia, but here, what do we call it here? I don't know. I forgot. But it was this video where this woman was walking and a guy in front of her had a secret camera and she's walking around New York. And I think it was called like 10 hours of walking in New York. And it was just this basically edit of all the men who told her to smile or whistled at her, or, something like that. And it was this very effective thing for this nonprofit. It was a marketing campaign, but it was very effective for this nonprofit. And having spent, a good amount of time in New York, 90% of this video, she's walking around the same few blocks in Harlem. She's just walking around an underprivileged neighborhood with people who live in housing projects and who stand out in the street and talk about LeBron all day. I mean, that's like what that neighborhood is. That's like the foundation, and that's like the culture of that neighborhood. And bringing a secret camera, and with, two white people bringing a hidden camera into a black neighborhood and then, exposing the crazy results when a lot of the people that were wolf whistling this woman were homeless. And so this whole ad is about privilege. And it's like, well, yeah, but these people sleep on the curb. Like, you can't talk about privilege to somebody who's sleeping on the curb. Like, it's just, maybe this person is dealing with mental illness. Maybe this person is dealing with alcoholism or drug addiction. Or maybe this person is just so far away from the reality where they have, like, I guess, where they have the comfort to care about social justice issues because they're literally starving in the street. And so I think, like, when certain people's freedoms, like, I guess, engulf other people's freedoms or other people's liberty, I feel like that's when I start tuning out. That's when it stops being effective for me to actually get involved and do anything is when, I guess when there's like a race for who could be the most marginalized or something like that's always something you probably want to avoid, right? But again, I'm a cisgendered white dude, so I can't really, I can't comment on that.
No, I think it's something that is not really talked about much, or I don't know who else I really asked that question to. I think it's really important to get some perspective on that because, and I've spoken about this to a few women, especially doing research in this area, and we're always thinking, how can we involve men in the conversation? Because it's not really useful to talk about this in a room of the converted, if you want to call it that. So it's always, kind of good to see how can we approach this in a way that will appeal to the most number of people, as you said. And, why I bring that up was, as I think I mentioned to you briefly, when we released our In Control, A Journey into Music Production mini documentary. And we were thinking, how can we make this the most kind of positive thing? We did have a few kind of facts in there that were not so positive, but on a whole, it was more, we kind of refrained from talking about men at all and like the impact that they're having on the industry and why things are the terrible way that they are, but more looking at, okay, things are the way that they are. We can't really do anything about that now or what's happened in the past. So kind of complaining about that, as valid as it is sort of a waste of time is how I see it. But then kind of looking at, what do we do now? So how do we get past this? And the best way is to empower ourselves. And I guess in a way, talking this through, it matches what you said, which is kind of bringing the marginalized up, which is by creating a safe space where maybe women feel more comfortable to learn about these topics. And then maybe once they know or kind of feel comfortable to have the knowledge to go into the spaces where men are, then maybe they'll have the confidence to kind of speak up or something. Anyway, that was kind of our thinking.
That's a good, that's a good way of looking at it for sure. And I think maybe, I feel like my video is probably much more ranty at men, but it was because it was hopefully, to a lot of people watching it, it was coming from a peer. So that, they saw it coming from a peer. So they were, no, it's interesting. There's oh my God, I can't, I'm so bad at remembering book titles now, but Clarence Thomas wrote a really good book that I think it was called like My Grandfather's. If this was like the Joe Rogan Experience, I'd be like, Jamie, look that up. So he wrote a book about he's a conservative Supreme Court justice who is a black man, and he has a very interesting. I don't know why I bought this book, but it was just about his grandfather's principles, and that ended up becoming his own as a Supreme Court justice. Which is one of the most important roles you could have in the United States. And so it was really fascinating because he looked at civil rights in a way where, the reason he's such a big fan of free market capitalism and the reason that he's such a big fan of the reason he's a fiscal conservative, an extreme fiscal conservative, is because he believes that black people should have, or, people of color in general, should be able to have as easy of an opportunity to become as powerful as white people, because white people are inherently racist and they never will not be until they are born in an environment where the power dynamic is equal or changed to where people of color have more power. And it's like really crazy to read this person that's usually regarded as like this conservative, most people who are progressive don't listen to it. It's really crazy to hear him have these like pretty extreme anti-white views, really, but I mean, it was respectable and well put, but it was such a good argument in that regard. Like, no, like we're going to empower ourselves. I do not want affirmative action. I do not want reparations. And I don't, I'm not a person of color, so like I can't comment on if this is the right or wrong route to go. And obviously there's many more variables to consider, but it was just, anybody looking for a different view of like empowering marginalized people. That's actually, and I wish I could remember the name. It's called like My Grandfather's.
I think it's called My Grandfather's Son.
Okay, My Grandfather's Son. Okay,
yeah. Cool. Yeah. Nice. All right, cool. Well, we've been through so much, Ben, and I think now I'm going to struggle to cut this down and cut this episode down into a shorter time. But we do have some audience questions. We had quite a few, actually, so we had to cut this down to 3. So we'll go through them quickly. So there was one from Dory Williams. So she asked, how do you think men could make music production a more friendly and inviting place for women?
I think not using it as a bait and switch to sleep with them would be like the obvious first step, which is easier said than done because, boys will be boys. No, I don't. I mean, it's just one of those things where you have to. That was one of the most jarring things about my own polling that I did was, I asked those questions and to find out how many women had been in that position where, they thought that they were going to work on, to learn about audio or collaborate with somebody and then found out that it was just a date or that they were expected to, I think that that's like the number one no-no that needs to be considered. And beyond that, I really think if you get that out of the way, then it becomes a lot easier to just treat them like peers because you just have that. Yeah. So I'm not sure how you would go about achieving that. Yeah. From like from a woman's perspective, I'm not sure how, because I would be terrified to go to a guy's studio unless it was somebody who I knew for a really long time or, So I think that might be the best the first thing to go about. But other than that, I think just recognize homophily, in terms of my own video or in my own research. I think it would just be to recognize homophily and react to it and just, be like, no, this person is fully capable of everything that I am and probably more. So,
I love both of those. And the first one especially, it's just good to hear that from you, Ben, because I think it's, hopefully other men can see that. Because, yes, sometimes you don't realize how it's coming across, but it can make many people feel uncomfortable, and personal experience is the same thing. So
that was a hard pill to swallow. And I think it's because I don't really collaborate much that it was so hard to believe, because I've never really been in a position where I've been like, hey, kind of like most of the time when I've had women in the studio or men in the studio, it's like a session musician that I'm hiring by the hour. And so it's not, it's at like 11 a.m. and I'm like, all right, I need violin, and so I think, I'm just not from like that. I don't know. Some people are just way more collaborative with music. And so I guess once I started diving into that, I was like, oh, this is a real issue. Like people treat this like dating. It's like
massive.
Yeah. It's terrible.
And the amount of times that like, even personally, I've just been asked to, like it's 11 p.m. We're all like jamming in the studio, like come over and do this and that. And there's always a thing in the back of your head. You're like, do I say yes? And even though I feel uncomfortable, I don't know these people and they could be genuine, or do I just say no and miss this potential opportunity? And that thing's always in the back of your head. And the thing that we haven't really spoke about, but like I will mention, is that there's always a thing in your head always saying that like the man can easily flip this around, like you can say that, I don't really feel that comfortable. Like can we do this at a normal time? Which I've done and then never heard back from the person.
Sure.
But like then like they could say, well, what do you mean? Like I obviously didn't mean that or whatever. But it's very easy for you to look like you've made the assumption where it's easy for them to say, actually, it was not like that.
To make things a million times more complicated too, I do studio residencies here from time to time. And through part of the time when I was making the video, I actually had 2 women doing the studio residency. And I was kind of just, after, doing a bunch of interviews, I like went upstairs and I was just kind of talking to them about it. And I was talking about this very thing. And I was like using the studio residency as an example. Like I was like, this, I hope, is a positive thing where you're learning something, because this isn't a long date. You are like literally, you have your own space and you have your own studio and you have your own room and all these things. And it was funny because they were like, yeah, but why we have gone on dates, or we did date people that were, musically inclined and learned from them too. And so you also don't want to just say, any person that I work with musically, I shouldn't date, or any person I date, I shouldn't work with musically, right? Because then, then you're also like creating another potential issue where you're just like, oh, I'm kind of attracted to this person, so I'm not going to let them, learn from me, or I'm not going to include them, or I'm not going to hire them, or, whatever it is. Yeah. And so that I was just like, I just need to like pretend that I didn't hear that and just continue making this video, because like, that's just, it's like too many, because that does make sense, because it does create like an additional layer of like, you might have somebody who's like too paranoid about that. And then, but I guess it just depends on the person, and it's just so complicated. And I'm glad that I don't have a daughter who's a musician, because my hair would be pulled out of my head. Like I would be losing my mind all the time.
Yeah, I know. And I'm glad that, I don't know, my parents probably had no idea about this side of things.
Yeah, don't show them my video ever. Yeah.
No, I won't. Let's not go into that side of things, because you're right, that just opens up a whole new kind of can of worms. Anyway, the second question was from Alexandra. She asked, how does the presence of a female producer affect the way an otherwise all-male team might work?
So I feel like my male team, when I think of that, that's hard for me to answer, just because I'm a pretty solitary person. I don't really work with other people that often, but there is something that happens every now and then where I'll be, around another guy, whether it be part of a tour or whether it be, at the dog park or wherever it is. And every now and then, and they'll nudge me and say, look at that girl's tits. And I don't know what to do in that, if I know the person well, I'll just be like, what do you want me to say? Like, this is so weird and uncomfortable now. Like, what am I supposed? Yeah, look at them. What are we doing right now? Are we like sharing a sex moment in the park? Like, it's just so bizarre to me. And I never understood the psychology of it. How some guys are like that. How they're just like, let's like look at women like they're porn and talk about it in public. Like, that's just the weirdest thing you can do. And so, but that does exist, and that is a thing. And if you introduce a woman to that team, then they can't say that stuff anymore. Or, then I guess I can see that being, where they would want their guy time alone or whatever that means. And other than that, I think it might even relate to the last question, to where it's like, if nobody's attracted to anybody else, and if nobody's trying to sleep with anyone else, then like none of this stuff really matters. Like, like when I've been on tour with women and they're, if it's a completely platonic relationship, I don't care if, I didn't shower that morning. Like, I don't care what my hair looks like. Like, I just need to get to the next city and play a show, and I'll worry about it before I get on stage. And so, but I think that if you had some sort of like dynamic where you're treating it like a very long date, then I suppose it would be absolutely miserable. I'd be like constantly worried about how I looked and how I was acting, but like, and so I think, again, it's just, not treating women as peers rather than sexualizing them, which, is it might be harder to bite off than, it's probably going to be difficult for some guys and less difficult for others. But I can say, for any men listening to this, I can say that, doing that when hiring women on tour in situations like that has been tremendously successful in me having less headaches and having an easier time touring. And it's opened up, 51% more options of people to hire who have talents that, could be specific to what I need. And so, it's a good idea all around.
Awesome. Good to know.
Yeah.
And last question is from Jessica Morris. So she asked, if you were president and could make one executive order to help women in music, what would that be?
That's interesting. One executive order. Okay. I don't think it would be that exclusive to music, but I think it would end up helping maybe in the long run. I think I would make companies have to be transparent the same way that a 501c3 or a nonprofit organization is with how much they're paying their employees. As long as employers have secrecy, they could skirt around equity laws, and they do that. But if everyone who works at a company could easily see how much everybody else makes, and if the public could see how poorly a company is treating the marginalized, then you'd see some progress happening mighty fast, I suppose. See, I think that I wouldn't immediately pass laws that force equal pay just because it could be skirted so easily. Like, you'll end up with more women who are cleaning the offices of men who are executives if you did that, and then all the cleaners would be paid equally and the executives would be paid equally. I think that I'd pass laws that would make employers face being ostracized by their workers and their customers. Yeah. And I'm frankly amazed that we're okay with this culture where we don't talk about how much we're being paid. And in some cases, we even sign contracts saying that we won't. And it's complete nonsense. I think that it removes the chance of being ostracized from the powerful. And that's, that's like, we need them to be, to be ostracized when they do bad things. And paying women less is a real thing. And we have this ongoing debate today about, like, are women paid less? Is it fair that they're paid less? How much less are they paid? We don't know, because we don't know how much anybody's being paid, because none of this stuff's transparent. Because we still live in this, at least in America, it's very uncouth to talk about how much you make, how much you make per year. And I really think that I cannot think of any other reason why this would be a thing other than like the old union busting type of people just trying to get that into culture. Like, it just makes no sense because it's a fascinating thing to talk about, like to talk, well, I got a raise last year and now I make 60,000 and now I go, blah, blah, and I can afford this much. Like it's such an easy conversation to have, but we talk about the weather and won't talk about, our car payments. So I think that would be the executive order is all companies have to be transparent in how much they're paying all of their employees. And then the pitchforks would come out, and you would start seeing a lot of women getting raises.
It's a good one. I think it's something not super direct, but something that'll probably have a more long-term impact. So cool. I like it.
Yeah, I suppose you always want to I guess if I only have that one executive order, I suppose you want to create something that is going to create a cycle that's going to keep snowballing and getting bigger, right? Yeah. Rather than just one rule. So create a new culture.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. Good one. All right. Thanks, Ben. This has been fascinating, and I'm sure it's going to be really interesting for our audience to listen to as well.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to me mansplain for how long it's been.
No, it's been a pleasure. And anyone that hasn't checked out the video on Ben's channel, please do. It's called "Why Aren't There More Female Producers?" on Benn Jordan's channel on YouTube with 2 N's on the Ben. So really, really, really interesting watch. So thank you again. And so have you got much else on for today? Is it just preparing for your trip still?
Yeah, it's what time is it? Yeah, but it's evening, so I'll probably just charge some batteries, and I'm obsessively looking at a map to try and figure out exactly my route. I'm trying to memorize the areas because I'm just going to have a compass for part of it, and I'm not going to actually have a path or anything. So it's all right, remember where the rivers are and remember how to. So, but I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah.
All right. Well,
it'll make
I
for
hope
good.
That's an enjoyable adventure, and you get through okay till the end.
Yeah. What time is it where you are?
It is 12:20 p.m.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So on a Saturday, and it's good. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, lovely to chat to you, Ben, and I hope you have a great trip. And everyone check out this video if you haven't already. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.